Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. Are we good, ladies?
We're great.
This is going to be on the recording. Celeste isn't editing this out. Thank you for Celeste for everything you do to edit my podcast. But okay, I'm going to start with a few things. Sometimes in life, Mary and Lulu and I have experienced a very difficult process in getting this podcast going, but we're here. And we're good.
Yeah.
And I get to see your beautiful faces, and it all worked out for a reason the way that it did. So I like to say everything happens for a reason. Some people get annoyed when I say that, but I believe it. Good and bad, there's a reason behind everything. So today, I'm not going to tell a story, except I will, before I introduce Lulu and Mary, I will say again, like I said in my podcast that just came out today, that I am struggling with the fact that I have a child going to high school, and I cannot even process how quickly it went by. So Mary's son is also going off to high school. Lulu, I understand you're a mother. It's
and
just
a grandmother.
And a grandmother. It's just sometimes I talk about this a lot, how life just happens in the blink of an eye. And when I had Sophie, my oldest, who's 14, people used to say to me when she was a baby, oh, it goes by so fast. It goes by so fast. And they were not kidding when they said it goes by so fast. Do you have any words to add to that before I introduce you?
I'd say enjoy every minute of it, because even though it goes so fast, it's great to watch them grow up. So
Wow. I'm dealing with a teenage girl, Lulu.
I know, well, that's so a little hard. Right, I've been there, done that, still dealing with things, but but now I get to enjoy my grandchildren. So I'll watch them grow up.
Oh, I love that. What about you, Mare?
I don't think it's really hit me yet. I think boys are a little different. And then obviously it's not as big of a blow because I've got the older one who's going to, be at the same school. So that gives me comfort that, he'll have the cool older senior brother, hopefully, who's nice to him. But yeah, I know it does go by fast. But
I mean, we were just in preschool. I feel like I just met you, Mary. We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Today, I'm really honestly honored to have Lulu Daly from the organization called One World Surgery. They are celebrating their 20th year anniversary. This is an organization that provides surgical and medical care to the needy. These are people that can't afford pretty much anything, and they have a location in Honduras, and they are just opening a new location in the Dominican Republic. And I'm very honored to have you on today, Lulu. So nice to meet you, even though it was hard getting this going. I'm also very honored to have my dear friend, Dr. Mary Hannon, a reoccurring guest on the podcast.
That's right. Round 2.
She hasn't been on in about
4 years.
4 years. I started in 2020. So yes, and you were on in 2020 in the throes of COVID. Dr. Mary Hannon is an ER doctor. She also has her own business that I will take credit because I told her that, Mary, you need to do this. You need to do it. And it's called South Bay MD. And if you're local to the South Bay, she's a concierge doctor. So she makes house visits and house calls, and she does everything you can imagine, the sports physicals for my mom listeners that need to get their kids their physicals. And she is just an all around good egg. I love her to pieces, and I'm just really lucky to call her my friend. So there's my intro. And a doctor, and
real doctor,
right?
She's a real doctor, and also I sometimes call her for medical advice. So I'm trying to cut back on that, Mary. I'm really sorry.
All right.
So let's start here. I kind of wanted to get the backstory on One World, Lulu, and why you started the organization, because I think it's so interesting. And it's not something that like most people would even think to be able to handle and do. And I would just love to get the backstory on why it started.
Okay. Well, I always say I'm glad I didn't know what I didn't know, because it's been quite a journey. But about 20 years ago, Peter and I and our 4 children went on a medical mission to a place in Honduras called NPH, Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. It was an orphanage. And when we went there with our kids, we realized that this was something we wanted to do. We tried to do other missions with our 4 kids, but they were young and it was hard to do. I'm a nurse, Peter's an orthopedic surgeon, and to do it as a family was a little difficult. So once we got to the home in Honduras, we realized that we could work together. Our kids, it was an orphanage with, at the time, 500 kids. So our kids were sort of, on the ranch playing with all the kids, where Peter and I could work we were working in the external clinic they had that served the regions around in the little areas around the home. And then they had an internal clinic for the children. So we went in the afternoon, we went into the clinic and we met a little girl named Angela, and she was 9 years old at the time. And she had a condition called ectodermal dysplasia. It was very, very rare. In the United States, if someone was born with that condition, they could be treated right away. But there she couldn't. And it was like her legs were crisscrossed and she couldn't walk. And she was in a wheelchair. And her parents had died of AIDS, so her brother and sister were on the ranch at the time. And so Peter looked at her and said, yes, I can help her. But he was operating in this semi-trailer that was just like a mobile home that was made up into a makeshift OR. And they were just doing like lumps and bumps in there. So there was no way. This is a very, very complicated surgery. So he said, oh, I could help her, but we're going to have to bring her home. And we were there with the director, which was like the father of the home. And so what am I going to say? I'm like, well, okay. And so then Peter said, I said, well, how long do you think it'll be? And he said, oh, probably about 6 weeks. And I said, well, I could do anything for 6 weeks. So we brought her home. Now, here is a little girl that didn't know us, that, had never been outside her little town, that was an orphan on this orphanage. It was really, I can't believe how brave she ended up being, but she came with us and we brought her home, and Peter did surgery on her legs. So what he had to do is break the legs in 3 places and then put these external fixators on her legs. So they, these round external fixators with pins in it. And so I went after the surgery, which was about a 6-hour surgery. She came out and I looked at her, and he took down the sheets of the bed, and there she was in 6 external fixators with 36 pins. And I honestly had to sit down, because the only thing in nursing school that bothered me was pins, and he didn't tell me about that. And so then I said, well, now what am I supposed to do? So her legs were like crossed like this. They came out like this with these external fixators. But they were so wide that to get her into her house, we had to turn her sideways just to get her in the front door. And I said, now what am I supposed to do? So he handed me a sheet and he said, well, you have to turn her pins every 6 hours until her legs get straight. So I said, well, what do you mean? And so here's this computerized sheet that said turn number 2, number 8, number 16. So I would do that. And then the next 6 hours would give me all the other numbers. And in 4 months, her legs became straight. So then she ended up living with us for a year, because he had to do some other surgeries and take off the fixators, and she had to learn how to walk. So she became part of our family. So she spoke perfect English after about a month. She started calling me mommy and daddy right of the day of the surgery. She called herself Angela Daly. We brought her to school. She started in a wheelchair and ended up walking. She was in second grade, made her first communion. Now, she was a little older to be in second grade, but she had never really been to school. So basically, I wanted her to be in school for the socialization and to learn English. And she did that beautifully. But then it was time to take her home. So that was really tough. We brought her home and we integrated her there for 2 weeks. But this was what changed everything. When we brought her into her classroom, she said, we were saying goodbye and it was pretty traumatic. But she sat down in her classroom and she wouldn't even look at me. And I was really upset because here, she was part of our family. I didn't know what to do. It was very hard. So I called her out. I said, Angela, come here. And I said, Mommy's leaving now. And then she went hysterical. And Peter's like, are you happy now? But it was like this connection. And she said to me that changed everything. She said, Mommy, stay with me. Now, she didn't say, take me back to Minnesota. I want to be back with your family. I want, to be at your home. She said, stay. And I turned to Peter, I hit him and I'm like, do something. And that was the thought. That was, we weren't any of these visionary people. We didn't have this big thing. It was really do something so we can come back every year to see her. And then it was like, build a little room. And really what I basically thought is that we would build this small little room next to the external clinic so we could be a part of it. And then I'm sorry to talk over you, but you had me crying, number one. I think Mary was tearing up too, but I don't know. Like I said, when we started, I was like, everything happens for a reason. There's a reason why you went there and met her, and just that, like, thinking of that age, my daughter's 10. So like understanding that that's how young they are at that point. Right. And just knowing like she had lost both her parents to AIDS, the trauma of that. And then finally finding people that she saw as parental figures, just all of that combined, like that tremendous pain on such a young kid. Right. I can't even imagine what that was like for her. But when you said that she wasn't like, I want to go back to Minnesota, that really is just like a moment where I'm like, that's just unbelievable, because you would think that this young kid would be like, I want to go back to the United States and not live in a country where I have so little. But she obviously knew that that's where she belonged. Right. Right. It was very, you're right. Exactly. That in that moment for us was like, wow, this is it. And the place was just such a wonderful place that I'm like, okay, we can do this. So like I said, I thought it was going to be a room. Peter had a different idea. He had started the first surgery centers in Minnesota prior to that. And he thought that he could just do it again in Honduras. But it was pretty much of a struggle to get it going, because it was the first surgery center ever to be built in that country or in foreign countries. No one had ever had that concept, but we just kept going along. It took about 4 years to build. When you're building it, it was pretty difficult. No one knew exactly how to do it, but we did it. And, 4 years later, it was opened, and we called it the Holy Family Surgery Center. It's still called that because we always said that it was a holy place. It was a beautiful family, and it was a surgery center. That's how it got its name. And then we just started going slowly, doing our first time down there to do medical surgical procedures. We only did 2 the first week. And then it started building. And then the next time we went down, we did 13 and then 27. And then it kept getting bigger with all our friends coming. And it was really family and friends that helped us start it. And And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And
was it just doctors and like nurses, like family friends would come and like pitch in? Tell me about that.
It was, well, how it really started is I started talking about what we wanted to do. And I was just at dinner with my parents and their best friends. And Billy said to me, well, how are you going to do it? And I said, I don't know. We're going to just do it. And he handed me a check for $25,000 and he said, go for it. And then my father's like, oh, well, we want to do it. And so it was really family and friends that I kept saying, well, if you want to help build it. And that's how we started, getting our friends and family to support us and believe in it. And the more, I always say, come and see. Because my role model in life has always been Mother Teresa. And the only way she got people to support her is if they saw it. And so I was like, come and see. And when people see it, they're like blown away because they're like, you're kidding me.
Well,
like,
let me interrupt for a second. And I sometimes I interrupt and I apologize, but I also want to ask Mary, because I love this story. I have so many questions. And I want to find out more about Angela now, but I want to know, Mary's very heavily involved in the organization. And I know that she goes every year and she does the operate or like assist or whatever you do, Mary, when you're there. But tell me and my listeners about what it's like to actually go there. I mean, I know I'm kind of skipping ahead, but I believe in that. Like there's reasons why we're called. I mean, I'm obviously spiritual as well to do certain things in life. Tell me about that, Mary.
Yeah, well, I mean, the beginning of that story is how we even met the Dalys, which was in a small church on the island of Grand Cayman. We were in Mass and we happened to sit next to Peter and Lulu. And they're a big Notre Dame family. So they were wearing all of their Notre Dame shirts, and we're a big Notre Dame family. So that we just started talking. And then it turns out Peter is an orthopedic surgeon. My husband was an orthopedic resident. And I mean, just the fact that happened, was not a coincidence. And then
how long ago was that, by the way?
That was 2009.
Okay. So it's been a while.
2009. Yeah. So, yeah. And so we've been going down. I think there's so many things. It's hard to put it all into words, what it's like going down there. But one of the greatest gifts is that you can go down as a family. And, there's a lot of different, Doctors Without Borders and different organizations where they need the medical end, but it's hard to bring your kids. And, to be able to go down as a family, which in the beginning, when our kids were younger, it was just Mike and I, but we've been going down now with the boys, the last several times. It really changes you as a family to be able to go down and serve side by side with your kids and the other families that are down there as families. It really, it's just impactful as a family to go down. And that's, always been an important part of what the Dalys envisioned for this. And then the other important thing that is different about this organization is the sustainability. So, I mean, there's a whole other separate story of one of the orphans on NPH who the Dalys took in, eventually became orthopedic surgeon. So he's there full time. And so, it's not like everyone comes from the United States, does some stuff, right, leaves, and then they're waiting for the next group to come. It's completely runs on its own every single day. They're down there now doing surgeries today as we speak, and so that sustainability is really remarkable what they've built, because that's very rare in a lot of these other, medical organizations. So
do you have a full staff there now, Lulu? So you have like how many doctors, how big of a staff?
We have the medical director, which is Merlin, who grew up on the home, and he's our director. I think we have about 80 now, but in the beginning it was just us. And then, like Mary said, Merlin was the first doctor that grew up at the ranch, and he was a family doctor, and he was watching, looking after our post-op patients. He was just doing us a favor until we came back. And then we asked him if he would ever consider going to into orthopedics, and he really admired Peter, and he wanted, they became very close. And so he went back to residency, and now he's the medical director. And I have to say, he calls me mom and Peter dad. So he's like my son for sure. But I have to say that he is probably the most talented orthopedic surgeon in the entire country, because every time doctors come down, they taught him over all these years, and he's just phenomenal young man. And we have a phenomenal staff, and, so it's, we couldn't think this big. So I'm like, we are not visionaries. We couldn't think like this. Never in a million years would we ever think we were doing the most complicated surgeries in the entire country. We do total joints that we do 50 to 60 a week. And in the whole country, they maybe do 50 a year. So it's like crazy, the things we do. There's not even an oncologist who's an orthopedic. There isn't one. And so we do all the oncology part. We have we do all the, a friend of ours came down and fell in love with it. And he is a surgeon that does all the mastectomies and does breast cancer research. So we started that program. It just, when people come down, they're like, how can we help? Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh, well, just join us and figure it out. And it's gotten big. We don't want to get too big where we can't really focus and take care of all the patients we have. We have 5,000 on the waiting list.
So that's what I was going to ask. So it turned into like all different kinds of surgery. In the beginning, it was orthopedic surgery, and now
it's mostly orthopedics, but then we do the subspecialties.
Okay.
But we're doing, and there's so many on the waiting list, but we only serve the poor. So and if you can imagine what that's like, here in the United States, we have safety nets. Everybody can get care. All you do is have to go to the emergency room. Here or there, the poor have no other alternative. So let's say you're in a motorcycle accident, you break your leg, you can't go to work, you lose your family, they're on the street, and they can't get help for years and years and years. So we take care of a lot of post-trauma and people that haven't walked, for years. And I think when I knew we were doing what God wanted us to do, was we had a patient that was watching us build the surgery center, and he was he was shot in the leg and he couldn't walk. He was in a wheelchair for 7 years, and he was young, and he was family, he lost his family, and he was trying to keep his act together. And he came to us, and every time we were there, he'd say, please, doctor, help me, please. So finally he was going to be our very first really difficult case. And it was like a 6-hour surgery. And Peter and I, in a surgery center, you get operated on and then you leave. Well, he couldn't leave because this was a very, very hard surgery. So we'd keep him in the post-op room, and he'd be in the corner, and we'd be taking care of everybody else. And then at night we'd bring him in the middle, and Peter and I would sleep on either side of him. And we did that for 5 days. And then we had to leave. And then we brought him to Merlin, our doctor, who is the family doctor on the ranch. And we kept him in the internal clinic for 2 weeks. And then we came back 3 months later, and his name was Hoel, and he walked perfectly that I didn't even recognize him. I'm like, I know you, but he walked in perfectly. And I said to him, oh my gosh, you're here. Let me get Peter. So Peter was in the OR. I get Peter. Peter sees him, and he said to him, Hoel, does it ever hurt? And he said, oh yes, doctor, after I walked 3 to 4 miles. And then they both bursted out crying. And that's only one.
There's so many stories.
So many stories.
But that was one.
Let me ask you what it's like. I'll ask both of you, because, I would at some point love to come and have
We'd love to have you.
I just think that we have so much in our country, right? I mean, it's all about consumerism and like what you have. I have daughters. We live in an affluent area. We're very fortunate. What is that like to bring your children there? I'll ask both of you that, because I would assume that it kind of must put everything into perspective and maybe change them, and obviously, hopefully change them for the better as people.
Well, when we started, our kids were little, but we started we went to the West Indies. And like Mary said, it was a program that didn't foster families. And we were supposed to be there for a month. And the kids sort of got to see what it was like, but they couldn't help us and they couldn't work. And it was too dangerous for me to leave them to work along Peter. So when we found NPH and they let us bring our kids, that was a game changer because our kids really grew up going there and working beside us. So I think it changed all of them, because my oldest one, after she graduated, she lived on the ranch for a year, was a teacher, an English teacher. My second daughter is a nurse practitioner. And when we built it, she took months and moved down there and did all the protocols. My son, Michael, this is a good story, because he was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. And we thought that as we built this, he would be a missionary and take it over. But instead, he went into the seminary and now he's a priest. And I always laugh. I said, we gave one son to God and God gave us another in Dr. Merlin. So that's great. And then my son, Patrick, who probably loved the ranch more than anybody, he's our business guy and he's going to keep us going, supporting us. So all four of my kids have been always very involved. And my one daughter, before she married her husband, she made him go down there. And she said, if you don't love it, then I can't marry you. So not only did he love it, but they spent their honeymoon there.
I love that. That's amazing. Mary, what about you? And
I think the interesting thing is that it's interesting because you look at, all of the kids on the ranch who, many of them parents aren't alive or they're not in their lives. And you think, and they have very, very humble, where they live. And, it's nothing like what we have here. But I think it's interesting because in many ways, they have so many things that I wish my kids had, So when they go down there, it's like pure joy. It's playing outside. There's no phones. There's no social media. There's no TV. Like it's how it, used to be when we were growing up, And so these kids are so joyful and so happy. And to put your kids in the middle of that and pick up a game of soccer and, they completely immerse down there. I mean, my two boys, they're kind of over the whole, medical scene. So like, we don't see it. We go to the, Mike's in the OR, I'm in the clinic. I don't even see my boys. They're with the kids. They're working the farm. I see them at nighttime. And, that's so special that they get to see how joyful these kids who seemingly, especially compared to what, our standards, have nothing, but in some respects, they have so much more than our kids do.
Well, that'll make me circle back to Angela, because this all kind of pieces together. I mean, like you just said, when we were kids, we were so fortunate because we could, I was saying this the other day, I lived on a court and I would go play kick the can and Ghosts in the Graveyard and all these games. My mom would call us in for dinner. Our kids don't have that anymore. I mean, they're being destroyed by social media. So I think it's so important. Also, the spiritual component of it, just at the end of your life, right? I talk about life being short a lot. Like what as people are you going to look back on? You can't take it with you, right? So I think it's so important to do this as parents, So I'm going to be signing up, Mary. Well, I'm sure
July 27th to August 3rd.
We're going.
I don't know if you'll be able to put up with both my daughters, but we'll see.
No, you'd be surprised. They change
really?
Out there. They really do. They really do. They're like different kids,
Yeah.
Even for a portion.
Well, we have programs for them, and they work hard, and we make them work and play, but we make them work. And it's what I love about it is you're spending time with your family in a way that you never would before. It's like I used to say, it's like going to camp with your kids, because it's like that, and just the union with everyone and all the people you meet. I mean, we've met people from all around the country that I would have never known. And meeting Mary and Mike was the greatest blessing. I mean, we met them at the Sign of Peace. That's how I met my husband. And now I met you guys. And that was a connection that, what did you call me 5 years later and said you wanted to come? And I'm like, it was just amazing. And then you become dear friends. And just because you have the same goal is just to be the best version of yourself, is to give back.
And at one point that I just want to piggyback on that, because I think there's a big misconception that you have to be in the medical field to go down and make a difference. And it's completely not true. The vast majority of the groups that go down are not medically trained people. I mean, we obviously need some of them, but, we've gone down with a bunch of different groups of friends, and, there's accountants that, look at the books, and there's, every trade, including all of the kids, everyone has gifts to give. And, the medical part, that's why it's such a special place, because, that's part of it, but there's so much else to do. And so, don't think that, well, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, what am I going to do? Everyone contributes, everyone works, everyone, puts in all of their talents and, gets so much more in return. But that is kind of a big misconception, that you have to be in the medical field to go down.
Where is Angela now? I need to know.
So I am very proud to say that Angela is working for us as a sterile processor and a scrub tech in the OR. So she went back, and it was interesting. After we took her back, we kept going back. So the first 4 years we were going 3 times a year, and, to check on things. And it was amazing. She would never talk to me for 5 years. She would stand beside me. She would stare at me. She'd be right there, but she never said anything. And I was very patient, because I knew that if I kept coming back, she would realize I wasn't going to abandon her. Mm-hmm. So then when she realized, wait a minute, we're coming back almost every month, she sort of settled down. And then was interesting what she did. And this is how she worked for us. It was in 2019. My daughter was having her 5th child, the one that's a nurse. She was having her 5th child. And there was she had complications in that pregnancy. And so I had to cancel my time down there. I was going in October and I couldn't go, but Peter went. But Angela called me and she said, Mom, you helped me many years ago. I want to come and help you, because I know Trisha's in bed rest and I know there's 4 little ones. I want to help. So we said, okay, you had 2 months off of school. So we brought her to help us and to help me. And then the baby was born with a ton of complications, but COVID happened. So she couldn't leave the country. So then she stayed with us. She was now with us for a year. And then my husband, Peter, got diagnosed with a rare kind of cancer. And so she's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do it all. I can't be all these places. So she stayed a little bit longer until we got him situated, everything got situated. And then she went back, but then she was like, Mom, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, you're good with your hands. You know, if it wasn't for you, this whole thing wouldn't have been inspired. Why don't you go back to school? So One World Surgery sent her back to school, and she just graduated in December, and now she's working with us. And it's so much fun to see her work with Peter, because here's the 2 of them that really started it, and they work so well, and it's beautiful, and she loves it.
That's amazing. That's like, that's a total full circle moment. Right. And I'm sorry. I hope that Peter's I'll say some
Yeah,
prayers.
he keeps me on my toes, but
He's a fighter. Sounds like you're all fighters in your family.
Yeah, he keeps us on our toes, but he's doing well. So matter of fact, we're going to Honduras on Saturday. So
they just came back from the DR.
We went to the DR last week, and yeah.
Okay, so you're going to both places. So what I want to ask is for my listeners that are listening to this story, and I'm sure as inspired as I am, if people want to get involved or they want to donate or they want to, what are some ways that, you know, I have listeners all over the world could get involved?
Well, they can go on our website, which is oneworldsurgery.org. And if they, there's places to donate, but really if they want to come see it or learn more about it, there's videos on there. There's also all the mission trips. Now we have 2 places. The Dominican is, the primary care clinics are open, but the surgery center, we're just being accredited and we're waiting for the surveyors to come. And then we should be up and running by the middle of the summer. And that's a big, huge ordeal to get through because a surgery center to them, they had no concept of it. So it's been hard to get going, but it looks like it's going to be up and running. It's a beautiful facility. And we took what we didn't really know in the first place and we made it better in there. And in the Dominican, it's very different because people go there on vacations all the time. But when you go into what we call the Batays, that's where the Haitians live. They were brought over years and years ago for the sugarcane plantations to work. But the thing about in the Dominican, if you're not born in the Dominican, if you're not a Dominican, then you don't have papers. So they can't get help. And so that is... there's over 1 million right near us. And that was one of the reasons. There are a lot of poor people in the Dominican with the Dominicans and the Haitians. So we wanted to just join them together and hopefully make a difference there.
Do you worry about your safety when you go to these different locations?
No, because I always say I'd rather die doing a mission work than to go to the mall. So no, I'm not. We're very safe. We have on our buses, we have security. One in Honduras, we don't really leave the home because it's a little bit more questionable outside. But in the DR, we're able to go into the little batays and go into their homes. And it's just amazing. I mean, with their homes is a hut, but I'm not afraid there. In
all these years, there's never been one security.
No, but we're very cautious. But it's interesting in Honduras, the entire country knows who we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, I'm not afraid. My mother, who's 92, we took her, she's been to Honduras several times. We just took her to the DR and she's gone into the Batays and she loves it. And we take all kinds of people, so, and it's great to watch, no matter what, to watch people grow just to grow in their faith, just to see what's out there, because 95% of the world lives like this, and to see how blessed we are. But the thing about working with them is they do more for us than we do for them. Mm-hmm. And that's really the truth.
Let me ask you a question about like the faith piece of it, because I do talk a lot about that piece on the podcast. Do you feel like settled, like in your life? Like you just said something like, I'd rather be doing this than like going to the mall if this is the way I'm going to go out. I mean, but that's a question for both of you. I mean, I know Mary, was an ER doctor and really difficult like parts of Los Angeles. And this has just been her calling throughout her life, is to help people. That's something I admire most about her, aside from being pretty darn funny. I think I say a lot on the podcast. I mean, Lulu, you don't know me. Mary does. I'm a big giant pain in the butt. But I do this this is like kind of my calling and my way of giving back. And I always feel like if I could get a few points in heaven and make it up there someday, like maybe this is my piece of doing it. Like I love hearing about living a purpose-driven life. Like I think it's really, really important to do stuff to give back in life. I know that was a really long-winded question.
No, my favorite quote is from Mother Teresa, where she says, I can't do what you do, you can't do what I do, but together we can make a difference. And that's exactly how I see everybody. I mean, I can't be a doctor like Mary. And even though I'm a nurse, I do a lot of the cooking. Like there's all kinds of things that you can do. But together is what we make it. Peter was the brains behind it all. I had the we always say the brains, the heart, they have to work together. And, I was raising the money. He was doing all the work. And then now that there's so many people involved, the blessing of everything was when he got sick, we just stepped back for almost a year. And it just took off. We were like, oh my gosh, it humbles you because we're like, they don't need us anymore because it just took off. And that's because, you know what? I always say God's in charge. I do say this, if this is really meant to be, it will continue. God will continue it. And it's been, we know that God has his hands all over it because we're not that smart. We did say yes along the way.
Yeah.
But we're not that smart. I mean, when I look back and think of all of it, I'm like, whoa, it took a tremendous amount of people to help out, just a lot. And so, that's not one person, but,
you're smarter than you think you are. Go ahead.
No, I think one interesting stat is, that the places, Mike always says the place is touched, by God, because they have never had, every surgery center in Los Angeles and New York, always reports there are in surgery, there are some bad things that can happen, right? You can have, bad side effects. So One World Surgery, there's never been a cardiac event. There's never been like their stats on just, potential complications in surgery. Just defy. It's amazing what goes on down there and what they get done. And it just seemingly all works out.
Right. I always say we do what we do because we're Catholic, but you don't have to be Catholic to do what we do because there's all different people from all over the country or even the world and all over with different faiths, mm-hmm. But it's all the main thing is to do good. Yeah. But I do have a chapel at every place, the two places we built has a big chapel because I want to give glory where glory is to be given. And that's why I think that it is so successful because, in Honduras, we have this beautiful chapel and then the DR, I went there last year and I'm like, where's my chapel? I put it right in front of the entire building. So everyone that pulls up knows that this is ordained. And I really believe it.
I love that. I think that that's amazing. So in closing, I just want my listeners, I know that I follow you on Instagram. So if someone wants to follow you, can you just plug that? I think it's One World Surgery.
Oh, One World Surgery. Yeah. OneWorldSurgery.org. Yep.
Yeah. And then Instagram is One World Surgery and Facebook and Twitter. They're on all the social media.
Okay. Yeah. So I just want to say how blessed, I hate saying blessed, but I really truly feel that way that I was able to meet you today and talk to you, Lulu. I know it was hard to get this together this morning, but we did it. We got through this and we're still here. And I hope that for my listeners that are listening right now, I truly mean that. I mean, I talk about it a lot that we're here for such a short time. I say this all the time. And it doesn't matter. Like I'm guilty of being a shopper. Mary knows this about me. No pair of shoes is ever going to feed my soul the way that doing something good for somebody else does. And I think that that's a really big thing. I know that a lot of you listen to the podcast because you might be dealing with like loss or grief or somebody's sick, and there's all kinds of ways that people can contribute in life. I know that I do this podcast and I love meeting people and talking to people and doing whatever I can to help people. Lulu, you also don't know this about me, but I do a mean Tina Turner. So I'm always happy to come and do a performance.
Oh, well, we do that.
We have karaoke night. Karaoke night.
Yeah, well, don't worry. Mary will put me on stage to do that. But in all seriousness, I'm really, truly think what you do is incredible. I'm really love my friend Mary. And I'm really grateful for you that you do what you do.
Oh, wow.
In closing, please get involved if you can. If you want to donate, it's super easy. You go to their website. And if you decide you're like me and you're like, I'm going to talk my husband into getting involved and maybe going, like, let's do that if you can. And in closing, you matter. Your story matters. Keep going.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.